Great to see you, Claudia. Thank you for coming in. I have to ask, because this is a key issue, not just with Democrats, but also with Republicans like yourself. You come from a high-tax state. Is the elimination of the deduction of state and local taxes a deal breaker on this tax plan for you?
I don't think it's a deal breaker. I think it's an important issue. You have to remember that we have, as a very high-tax state, over 30% of the filers nationwide are using the state and local tax deduction. In New York State alone, over 50% are in the 200-plus bracket. 44% are in the 50 to 100% bracket. So you're talking about middle-income taxpayers. So it is an issue, but we are doubling the standard deduction, which will probably minimize a lot of those itemizers and also provide relief and actually put more in the paychecks of taxpayers. And we're looking at, in New York, on average, we're going to be giving over $5,000 more in cash back to taxpayers of their hard-earned money.
And so I should mention on the high end, you also have elimination of the AMT, of the minimum tax. Exactly. So on both the high and the low end, there are things to compensate for that. But is there enough of a compensating factor from those elements to take care of the elimination of the deduction?
Yeah, it looks like what's going to happen is you're going to see those in the lower tax brackets, the middle income taxpayers, are going to receive the best benefit. That's part of the mission of the president. Remember, he wants to help the middle class. He's not interested in helping the wealthier in our society.
But he's also interested in growth, and the wealthy, frankly, do a lot of the growing in this country. They invest their money, if they're a small business, they may be considered rich, but they're pouring all of their money into their company, and that creates jobs.
Right, but they're also using a pass-through methodology. They're not doing a personal income tax return. They're doing a personal income tax return, but they're using a pass-through. So there are going to be a lot of other deductions that are going to be coming into play there, even though it's going to be simplified. It is a concern for New Yorkers, especially in high-tax states. Now, there is a contra-argument. There's an argument that by continuing to allow these deductions, we're actually enabling the tax and spend addiction of, like, Governor Cuomo, for example, from New York, and some of these tax and spend liberals that we have right here in New York who have actually driven jobs from our communities.
And their free spending habits are being subsidized by the folks in Texas and Florida, where there is no state income tax.
Right. I'm concerned about my middle income taxpayers like myself, people like me who just really need to have, I mean, doubling the standard deduction could be a huge help to many of us. And plus, just lowering the rate to such an extent, this is some of the largest tax cuts we've seen in a generation. It's going to be very historic, and if we can get this done, maybe make some compromises on the SALT, the so-called state and local tax deduction, and also pass the budget. The Republicans are going to be in great shape for next year. We're really going to see, I just heard you talking about the GDP and the growth. I think you're going to see explosive GDP growth if we can get this done, and hopefully next year, or sooner than that, get Obamacare repealed and replaced so that we can help our small business community. But we got to do the tax cuts
this year so that we all get we can all work it into our new tax reform. But Congresswoman, there's one thing about which there is no controversy at all. That's what happened. Very emotional moment on Capitol Hill today when both Democrats and Republicans stood together for Majority Whip Steve Scalise. He returned to the House floor for the first time since being gunned down in June. Let's take a listen.
It starts with God. When I was laying out on that ball field, the first thing I did once I was down and I couldn't move anymore is I just started to pray. And I will tell you, it gave me an unbelievable sense of calm, knowing that at that point it was in God's hands.
Wow, what a pleasure. Not only to see him, but to see both sides of the aisle praise God. I mean, when does that happen in Congress?
I know. It took my breath away. He is just a sensational guy, fantastic. His wife, Jennifer, was there. I was lucky enough to be there, and we had people that were my guests actually sitting in the balcony who were just, we were all in tears. And I have to say, I've got my Scalise Strong bracelet on today in honor of Congressman Scalise, who is such a brave leader. And he came back, and it wasn't just he said, hey, I'm glad to be back. He said, I'm back, I'm stronger, and it's more important now that I represent this nation and my community. And I couldn't be prouder of having a colleague like Steve Scalise. He is just, you know, just the best, the cream of the crop, and wonderful guy, well loved, as you say, by both sides. You couldn't ask for a greater person to represent our nation, really.
And we need that sort of moment at times like this. Claudia, Tenney, great to see you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Lauren.